Has everybody joined? Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, this is what I wanted to know. So we have to start our discussion from the point where we left yesterday. We were discussing about peasant shoes, a painting, a well-known popular painting by Van Gogh, a famous painter, and whose paintings are considered as masterpieces of modernist movement. I have sent the images also of Van Gogh's peasant shoes. You know, I told you earlier also that in modernism, the works of art or the works of literature, they were open to interpretations. Hermeneutic interpretation or analysis is possible in case of modern works of art or modernist paintings or works of literature. So the same is the case with this painting of Van Gogh, Peasant Shoes. Uh, Yesterday, when we were just going through that paragraph, all of a sudden, uh, the time was over. So we have to start from this point onwards. You know, it was this paragraph. Fruit trees in this world are ancient and exhausted sticks coming out of the poor soil. The people of the village are worn down to their skulls, caricatures of some ultimate grotesque typology of basic human feature types. Means these are the features of Van Gogh's paintings. Then how is it then that in Van Gogh such things like apple trees explode into hallucinatory surface of color? You know, hallucination is that impression which is created because of the presence of something, but taken for something else. This is hallucination. So the object is there, the colors are there, but the colors appear to be bright. They explode into brightness of the color. Such things as apple trees explode into hallucinatory surface of color, while his village stereotypes are suddenly and garishly overlaid with hues of red and green. How is it possible? It is because of interpretations. The focus is on interpretations. I will briefly suggest, Jameson says, number one, what is the main point? In this first interpretative option, what is the first interpretation? Just notice it that the wild and the violent transformation of a drab peasant object. Wild. Wild means determined, we can say, up to a certain level, and violent transformation of a drab peasant object, dull object belonging to the life of poor peasants. Nobody could have imagined of painting such things that might have been rejected as dull and uninteresting. Formation of a drab peasant shoes would world into the most glorious materialization of pure color or oil paint is to be seen as a utopian gesture. Yes, the main gist is that the hint is at bringing about reform in the system. Utopia. Utopia is that concept of society in which things will be better for all, irrespective of their class or irrespective of their gender. So the main motive of presenting this kind of image in the painting, or to make it immortal, was to give a present a utopian gesture as an act of compensation, which ends up producing a whole new utopian realm of the senses, or at least of that supreme sense, sight, the visual, the eye. So the main sense that is involved in its interpretation is the sense of eye, visual sense, which it now reconstitutes for us as a semi-autonomous space in its own right, part of some new division of labor in the body of capital. So in this way, Jameson keeps on moving forward in this kind of interpretation. He says, first of all, looking at this dull, drab peasant object reflecting the miseries of the poor peasants and his hard labor, hard work, one can look forward towards a betterment or reform in his situation. Then again, he moves forward and hints at some kind of new division of labor in the body of capital. Division of labor, we know the class system, how there are laborers and then there are the capitalists. So, hinting at or suggesting some new division of labor, some new fragmentation of the emergent sensorium, which replicates the specializations and divisions of capitalist life at the same time that it seeks to precisely it seeks in such precisely such a fragmentation, a desperate utopian compensation for them. So the gist of this long sentence or this paragraph, or we can say Jameson's own interpretation of this painting, is that the hint is at bringing about reform. How? By making this dull peasant object an object of painting, and in this way it can be made immortal. Then he takes up another aspect, that is Heidegger's interpretation. He comes up in the second paragraph. And what is Heidegger's interpretation? He says, just focus on the next paragraph. There is, to be sure, a second reading of Van Gogh, which can hardly be ignored when we gaze at this particular painting, and that is Heidegger's central analysis in his book, which is organized around the idea. Now, what is the central idea of Heidegger? That the work of art emerges within the gap between the earth and the world. Now, how you are going to interpret this sentence of Heidegger? The gap between the earth and the world is significant. And in this gap, we can deduce meanings and significant implications. In order to understand the meaning of this explanation of Heidegger, we have to move forward. He says, or what I would prefer to translate as the meaningless materiality of the body and nature, and the meaning endowment of history and the social. This is important. Materiality of the body. If there is physical object that is something material before us. On the one hand, there is the materiality of the body and nature. That means the object can be taken from the physical world. And then there is meaning endowment. How we have to endow that particular object with meaning of history and social. Looking at that particular object from historical and social point of view, we have to find out the meaning. So this is the gap between the earth and the world. Earth represents physical and world represents the perspectives, we can say, or the total scenario, from that point of view we can analyze the physical world. Now, in the this meaning, we need not, in fact, go through the entire paragraph because it is the repetition of the same idea. But we can focus on this sentence within inverted comma. This equipment, he goes on, belongs to the earth and it is protected in the world of the peasant women. This was Heidegger's point of view, that this object, that is peasant shoes, that belonged to the world of, that belonged to the earth, the physical aspect, and it was protected in the world of the peasant woman. He went further and Heidegger related it or correlated it with the other aspects of the peasant's life, moving forward to his wife also. And again, we come to the last part of this paragraph. Just focus on this sentence. Heidegger's account needs to be completed by insistence on the renewed materiality of the work. Renewed materiality of the work on the transformation of one form of materiality, the earth. See, materiality. This is something material, the earth, the shoes itself, and its paths and physical objects, the earth, its paths and physical objects, into that other materiality of oil paint. So on the one hand, there is one materiality of this object, that is earth, and the other materiality is its representation in oil paint that has been recreated, we can say, or that has been represented. So in this way, the other materiality of oil paint affirmed and foregrounded in its own life, in its own right, and for its own visual pleasures, but has nonetheless a satisfying plausibility. So this is Heidegger's interpretation. The second option or the second interpretation comes that we come across in this paragraph that has been quoted by Jameson, and that is of Heidegger. In this way, we can step forward and in our own way interpret this painting by Van Gogh. Now, can anybody tell me what he or she thinks about this painting? I want your involvement also. I want to know your views also on this painting.
Our own personal views or according to Heidegger?
No, your own views.
In the very first painting of Van Gogh's Peasant Shoes, I can relate it with my experience. Like since we left our school days, our elders, maybe family, relatives, or friends' parents used to say about the hard survival of the life by quoting one line like "beta joote ghir jate hain naukri paane mein." So this
Yes,
painting represents the same, like it represents
yes,
individuality, hardship, and also
yes,
it represents down to the earth.
yes, of course. This is what I wanted to know. Actually, everybody's interpretation might differ. Can anybody else come up with a new viewpoint?
Yes, ma'am. I totally agree with Prashant. What he said, it represents some way the wearing and tearing of something, and things don't remain the way they are forever.
Okay, yes.
So the sort of change that we always have to undergo. Nothing
So
is
your
eternal. So it
interpretation,
shows.
I think, yes, yes. Your
Yes,
interpretation
ma'am.
is different from Sushant's interpretation.
Yes, ma'am. It's a bit
Because
different that nothing is eternal, and everything just comes to an end.
yes, no doubt, I don't say that it is wrong. It is, that is why I am inviting interpretations on this painting. There
Yes,
can
ma'am.
be as many interpretations as your number. That means all of you can give different interpretations. So this is the focus, is that the point is that in modernist literature, interpretation is possible. The involvement of reader is there. You can very well understand the meaning that lies at in its depth. The depth is there, and in postmodernism, this is the lack of depth that we can see. In the very next paragraph, we have to study about diamond dust shoes, and I have also sent the image of diamond dust shoes to you. Just have a look at it, and then we can begin reading those lines. What is your first image? What is your first view when you look at this picture? A number of shoes are there.
Ma'am, the cultural
Actually, this is
symbol that could fascinate the entire mass that had been told here, maybe.
okay. Yes, you are
And ma'am,
very near that
at that time, ma'am, advertisements were
typical
quite
symbol
important.
also, and yes, you are now very much near that point, because Andy Warhol, who is the painter here under discussion, he started his career as a commercial painter first. He used to advertise. He used to make paintings for advertisements. This is this image that is of a diamond dust shoes that he had made, was meant for advertisements. Okay, he started uh, painting like this, and he also made the paintings of Marilyn Monroe, and one more name is there of a famous superstar of that period, whom he painted, and painted with a view to make them just like a commodity. Means that those paintings, you, if you have a look further in Google, you can search the paintings of Andy Warhol, of Marilyn Monroe, and the name of the other superstar we will read very soon. They have been just like posters. They have been painted like, just like posters. You can see when you are walking along the road. Similarly, Andy Warhol has also painted means posters for Coca-Cola and soup cans also. So in this way, when I give this much of introduction of Andy Warhol to you, then you can very well imagine that what will be the approach of this man. Although he was a commercial painter working for an advertising company, for a shoe factory, in fact, he was promoting a shoe factory, a particular brand of shoe. So he painted these shoes like that. But just have a look at diamond dust shoes. They were glittering, shining shoes, but they are not trying to convey any meaning. No? Just like you have a bunch of some fruits hanging over from some point, some hook. So there is just a bunch of shoes scattered in this painting, but they are not conveying any meaning. You can interpret, but you cannot move into the depth of this painting. So let's begin. Uh, at any rate, both of these paintings, both of these readings may be described as hermeneutical. Which readings? The readings of Van Gogh's paintings, in the sense in which the work in its inert means again immobile, we can say, objectal form is taken as a uh, as a clue or as a symptom for some vaster reality, which replaces it as its ultimate truth. Now we need to look at some shoes of a different kind, and it is pleasant to be able to draw for such an image on the recent work of the central figure in contemporary visual art, and he is Andy Warhol. His no longer obviously can interpret it with any of the immediacy of Van Gogh's foot care. Immediacy means immediate appeal. Immediately, the idea is these shoes represent this thing, or these shoes are the symbol of proceed. So Andy Warhol's painting Diamond Dust Shoes does not the same immediacy of Van Gogh's foot care. Jameson says, I am tempted to say that it does not really speak to us at all. It is his viewpoint. He says, I think it doesn't speak at all. Then he moves forward. He says, nothing in this painting organizes even a minimal place for the viewer. There is no scope for the viewer who confronts it at the turning of a museum corridor or gallery with all the contingency of some inexplicable natural object. So when you go to visit some museum or some gallery, if you come across any such painting, it might not appeal to you, or it might not suggest any meaning. Moving forward, we have to focus on the same paragraph, but we can safely skip some of the sentences, and then we can come up to this point. However, we have a random collection of dead objects, about after references there to Hegelian's book. Then the Van Gogh Hudgear are a heterosexual pair. Just have a look at another interpretation. How you can interpret shoes like this. That means they represent shoes of two different, means those two parts of the shoes, we can say, pair of shoes, they represent two different persons or gender, which allows neither for perversion nor for fetishization. Fetishization is a desire or preference, obsession kind of thing for a particular object. So in this kind of obsession, particular object. So here, however, we have a random collection of dead objects. Just focus on this interpretation. This is very significant. Andy Warhol's diamond dust shoes are just collection of dead objects hanging together on the canvas like so many turnips, as shorn of their earlier life world, or as the pile of shoes left over from Auschwitz. Auschwitz, was the German concentration camp in which, what kind of thing happened in those concentration camps that were set up in Poland for Jews, or the remainders and tokens of some incomprehensible and tragic fire in a packed dance hall. Suppose there is a dance hall, some hall is there, and all of a sudden some fire catches over there, and after the fire is extinguished, what things are left behind, that are left, or they are collected in the form of pile. So these shoes look like the two things. First, the shoes in the form of a pile that have been left over in the Auschwitz or the concentration camp, or those things that have been left behind after the fire has been extinguished in some dance hall. There is therefore in Warhol no way to complete the hermeneutic gesture. So this is a conclusion. You can't approach this painting from the point of view of interpretation or analysis. And to restore to these oddments are the things that are left behind, that whole larger lived context of the dance hall or the ball, the world of jet set fashion. Just imagine the dance hall is there, a ball is there, and who visit this dance hall? Jet set fashion. Jet set means fashionable rich persons, or the glamour magazines. Yet this is even more paradoxical in the light of biographical information. Just we have to look at the biographical information of Andy Warhol also. Warhol began his artistic career as a commercial illustrator for a shoe industry or for shoe fashions and a designer of display windows on which various pumps and slippers figured prominently. So he used to design windows also, or we can say showcases for displaying those shoes or footgear. Is tempted to raise here for too prematurely one of the central issues about postmodernism itself and its possible political dimension. Andy Warhol's work, in fact, turns eternally around commodification. I explained this term earlier also. This is the main feature of this is the main feature of postmodernism. Commodification of everything is the main feature of postmodernism. So this painting, which has become a means to fetch money for its painter, it has become a commodity. And the great billboard images. See, billboard images. Billboard, what are billboards? They are the hoardings, you can say, that you see by the roadside, meant for advertisements. So billboard images of Coca-Cola bottle. Coca-Cola bottles were also painted by Andy Warhol. So these shoes, diamond dust shoes, they were just like the bottles painted by Andy Warhol, just meant for the sake of promoting the cause of promoting the sale of these things. So Coca-Cola bottles or the Campbell soup can. He painted Campbell soup can also, which explicitly foreground the commodity fetishism of a transition to late capital. This is the main feature of late capitalism. This is, in a way, we are moving towards it's the transitional period, we can say. What is that? Commodity, the foregrounding of commodity. Foregrounding means bringing something to the foreground, to the prominence. This is a feature of formalism also. If you have studied about formalism as a theory, then you might have noticed that this is a main feature of describing a particular work of literature. In that particular work, from the formalistic perspective, the thing that is foregrounded, the light is focused on that particular thing, and the term that is used for this is foregrounding, bringing to the focus, bringing forward to the focus. So which explicitly foreground the commodity fetishism. This is predilection, this is obsession, or this is, we can say, the choice of today's time, that everything has to be commodified. And it is a transitional period towards late capitalism. Ought to be powerful and critical political statements. If they are not like that, there are that one would surely want to know why, and one would want to begin to wonder a little more seriously about the possibilities of a political or critical art in the postmodern period of late capital. Now, before we begin to interpret this painting, I again invite your interpretation. What would you like to say about this diamond dust shoes painting by Andy Warhol? Can anybody come up? Yes. Do you
Ma'am,
find
it,
any? Yes, Vinay,
ma'am,
do you want to? Yes,
ma'am, it encourages the consumerism.
yes, of course. Promotes the sale of, naturally when it promotes the sale, it was painted initially for promoting the sale. So it will increase or encourage consumerism. This is which is the main feature of late capitalism. Any other interpretation apart from this? This is what I want to focus, because this kind of painting cannot be interpreted in more than one or two ways. This is what is the point of focus, stress here. So moving forward to the next paragraph. This is the first point.
Ma'am, since you said that, excuse me, ma'am.
Yes, yes. Shivani, you can.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, since you said that it was on sale, so I think that somehow it was promoted that everything that is perfect should not be embraced. Something which is damaged can also be brought in. It can be bought and it can be embraced, and we can celebrate something which is damaged and which is not perfect.
Okay, good. This is what I want to encourage. All of you can come up with your own views.
Because nowadays, ma'am, it's so much in fashion that people wear ripped jeans, the jeans that is not damaged, the threads are coming out. So it earlier we used to think that those who are not very privileged, those who don't have money, may be wearing such kind of dresses. But since the paintings and movies can promote things like that in the masses.
Okay, good attempt.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now, moving forward, we can say, but there are some other significant differences between the high modernism and the postmodernist movement. This is movement. Between the shoes of Van Gogh shoes can be said to be the masterpiece of high modernism, and shoes of Andy Warhol, on which we must now very briefly dwell. The first and most evident is the emergence of a new kind of flatness. This is very important. This is flatness or depthlessness. This is what we have also already discussed in our last class. Depthlessness is the main feature of postmodernism. When there is no depth, then how can you interpret it? In various ways. There will be only one or two interpretations that can come up of such things. So flatness or depthlessness, this is a new kind of superficiality. Everything when seems to be superficial, it means there is no deeper meaning, no symbolic meaning. So it is shallow. No depth, that means shallow. In the most literal sense, we can say in the most literal sense, this is superficial. Perhaps the supreme formal feature of all the postmodernism, in which we will have occasion to return in a number of other contexts. In other contexts also, Jameson will discuss this lack of depth, depthlessness, or in other words, superficiality. The next paragraph takes up another aspect of this postmodernist painting. Then we must surely come to terms with the role of photography. This is important. in photography, there is the concept of negative also. Initially, when photography, the art of photography was not so advanced, then there used to be negatives also that we used to collect after getting our snaps. So, with the role of photography and the photographic negative in contemporary art of this kind. So, the main thing is that it's just like a replica, just like negative means negative, not means negative positive in that sense, but it means another version which can be developed further. So negative in contemporary art of this kind, and it is this indeed which confers its deathly quality on the Warhol image. Now, deathly quality means death-like quality. It's not deadly. It's not deadly. Deadly means dangerous. But here, death-like means when there is nothing alive, when there is nothing lively that can appeal to you, it's almost like death. Means you cannot uh, deduce meanings from this kind of painting. So this is deathly quality in Warhol's image, whose glazed X-ray elegance, glazed surface of that painting mortifies the reified eye. Reified again means concrete, that takes the shape of a concrete thing, physical thing. Eye of the viewer in a way that would seem to have nothing to do with the body. It doesn't have anything to do with death or death obsession or the death anxiety or the level of content. The point is that it is a word that comes to my mind at this time, that it is opaque. The opposite of opaque is transparent. So you can't just look through it, look into it, and find another meaning for it. It's deathly, it's just not lively, it's not alive. In this way, we can interpret the whole of it. So we can come up to the last part of it that is important. Although this kind of death of the world of appearance becomes thematized in certain of Warhol's pieces, mostly he had other paintings with the title of Traffic Accidents or the Electric Chair series. This is not, I think, a matter of content any longer, but of some more fundamental mutation, both in the object world itself. Now that becomes a set of texts or simulacra. Simulacra was the word that we discussed yesterday also. So postmodern has become a period of an image of the object. Everything is presented just as an image or simulacra. And in the disposition of the subject. So in this way, we can say that the image is important and not the deeper meaning is important. All of this brings me to the third feature. Jameson comes up to analyze the third thing I had in mind to develop here briefly, namely what I will call the waning of affect. This is important. We have discussed this earlier also. Waning of affect means decline of impression. When waning of affect is there, it means there is less and less of emotional content. So this is a postmodern feature, waning of affect in postmodern culture. Of course, it would be inaccurate to suggest that all affect means emotions, all feeling or emotion, all subjectivity has vanished from the newer usage. Indeed, it cannot be said that there is complete absence of emotions and feelings, but there is decline, there is lack. In some sense, we can say that there is lack or decline of emotions. Now, moving forward, he says, indeed, there is a kind of return of the repressed. Repressed means that is repressed, that is suppressed. In Diamond Dust Shoes, a strange, compensatory, decorative exhilaration, explicitly designated by the title itself. Just see the focus on the title, diamond, that refers to something glittering. So there are things that have been used as decorative pieces. Spangling material is that strikes the viewer because of its glint. So just focus on this text. He says that there is strange, compensatory, decorative exhilaration, explicitly designated by the title itself, although perhaps more difficult to observe in the reproduction. If the other paintings of the same kind have been made, in that it will be absent. This is the glitter of gold dust. What is important? Just he is moving forward to analyze. He says there is glittering light of gold dust, the spangling of gilt sand, which seals the surface of the painting. Seals the surface of the painting. That means the painting after Andy Warhol made this painting of shoes, then he completed it or he gave a finishing touch to it with the help of a spangling touch of we can say some kind of glitter. So the glittering impact is there. And yes, spangling of gilt sand, which seals the surface of the painting and yet continues to glint at us. Glint means reflect with some kind of light. We are impressed by its light. Think, however, of Rimbaud's magical flowers that look back at you. Now, the reference here in the remaining part of this paragraph is to two works, different works of first Rimbaud. Rimbaud is the name of the French poet, and the other, we will move on to Reich. Reich's archaic Greek torso that seem to appeal to us, unlike this postmodernist example of painting. So we can safely leave this and we can move forward to another paragraph. The waning of affect is, however, perhaps best initially approached by way of human figure. In the best possible manner, this waning of affect can be explained by the paintings of human figures that Andy Warhol made. And he made the paintings of which figure that you do know very well. And it is obvious that what we have said about the commodification of objects holds as strongly for Warhol's human subjects, stars like Marilyn Monroe, who are themselves commodified and transformed into their own images. So this is the main trend of postmodernism, that even the human figures painted by Andy Warhol, they have been transformed into a commodity. Just see the painting of Marilyn Monroe made by Andy Warhol that was meant for sale. In this way, it had become a commodity. And it has been transformed into an image. So these are the two striking features of postmodernism. And here too, a certain brutal return to the older period of high modernism offers a dramatic shorthand parable. Parable means a story that explains some idea of the transformation of the question, of the transformation in question. So which transformation? Transformation from modernism, high modernism to postmodernism. This is in question. So what example can be used to explain it in a more, we can say, appealing manner? For this, he gives the example of Edward Munch's painting, The Scream. Just have a look at the image of this painting, the Scream, made by Edward Munch, that I sent to you. And this is, this is an example of high modernist period. And it is therefore open to interpretations. Just have a look at it. There is a human-like figure. The word used for this figure is monad, M-O-N-A-D, monad. Monad literally means the smallest simple unit. And in biological term, it can be said to be a single-celled unit. In other words, you can say soul, or to be very simple and precise, we can say an individual. So there is, in this painting, a human-like figure is there. He is trying to shut both of his ears with the help of his hands. And just have a look at his gestures. His mouth that shows the gesture of scream. He's shouting. And in the background, there are different colors, bright colors are there, showing like circles. There are, they are in the form of circles. Concentric circles are there. Sometimes those circles take the shape of a loop. Now, how would you interpret it? Why this man is screaming? And why those concentric circles have been painted at the background, at the, we can say, back of this man in the background? He says Edward Munch's painting, The Scream, is of course a canonical expression of the great modernist thematics. See, thematics means themes of alienation, anomie. Anomie means lack of moral standards, solitude, and social fragmentation and isolation, a virtually programmatic emblem of what used to be called the age of anxiety. This is what I wanted to focus on. What was known as the age of anxiety? Can anybody tell me? Since you have studied history of English literature, then you must have the idea. What is the age of anxiety? Which period was known as the age of anxiety? Naturally, not the postmodern period. Of course, we still are full of anxiety, but not in that sense that has been categorized here. Just have a look at this statement. Just note down those various themes that together make up or constitute the age of anxiety. That was a period immediately following World War I or intervening the two world wars. So the age of modernism was known as the age of anxiety also. The very concept of expression presupposes indeed some separation within the subject, and along with that, a whole metaphysics of the inside and outside. Now, you can interpret this painting in your own way, but Jameson has given another interpretation that is important. What is important? We can leave aside 4 or 5 sentences, then we can come up to this sentence. And this is perhaps the moment to say something about contemporary theory. Yes. Now let us focus apart from these 3 paintings that we have discussed. Now let us focus on the theory. What does Jameson say about the theory, contemporary theory? Which has, among other things, been committed to the mission of criticizing and discrediting this very hermeneutic model of the inside and the outside. So this is the feature, characterizing feature of the contemporary theory. That means postmodernist theory. Now, in postmodernist theory, what can be categorized? He says it goes to the credit of this postmodernist theory that they are in habit of criticizing and discrediting the very hermeneutic model. So hermeneutic model is absent in this postmodernist criticism. Which has, among other things, being committed to the mission of criticizing and discrediting this very hermeneutic model of the inside and outside, and of stigmatizing such models as ideological and metaphysical, making them or complicated or giving them the shape of ideological and metaphysical concepts. And what is today called contemporary theory, or better still, theoretical discourses, is also, I would want to argue itself, very precisely a postmodernist phenomenon. This is important. You have to just underline it, because apart from all aspects of postmodernist culture, he has also pointed out main features of theory also, the contemporary theory. It would therefore be inconsistent to defend the truth of its theoretical insights in a situation in which the very concept of truth itself is part of the metaphysical baggage. So how can you find out the truth when the truth itself is a part of that metaphysics? The whole baggage means the whole, you can say the concept is based on metaphysics, and through that concept we have to find out the truth, which post-structuralism seeks to abandon. What we can at least suggest is that post-structuralist critique of the hermeneutical, or of what I will shortly call the depth model, is useful for us as a very significant symptom of the very postmodernist culture, which is our subject here. So post-structuralism, if you have studied it, can anybody tell me what are the main theories that are subsumed under this heading, and what are the main points of those theories? Because we can correlate the two, postmodernism and post-structuralism, at the same time.
Ma'am, post-structuralists are of the opinion that theory is not separate from reality, nor reality separate from theory.
Ma'am, post-structuralists generally opposes the ideas established by the structuralist.
Yes. To begin with, we have to say this thing.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
correct. You know, you have Roland Barthes' theory of the death of the author.
Yes, ma'am.
What does it mean? What does it mean?
It means that when we read a text, we should negate the author, and it is the reader who can interpret a different meaning of the text.
Yes.
So we can say the author is a type of dead person in the reading.
Okay.
So the death
Good.
of author
Good
comes
effort.
under a structural post-structuralist theory. Oh, sorry, ma'am.
Yes, just let us focus on the next paragraph, then it will become more clear. Over hastily, he says, we can say that besides the hermeneutic model of inside out and outside, inside outside means you have to find out the meaning. Hermeneutic model of inside outside, which Munch's painting develops. There are at least 4 other fundamental depth models. This is what I wanted you to focus on. What are those depth models means? Models of interpretation, which have generally been repudiated in contemporary theory. First is, you can note down, first is dialectical, one of essence and appearance. Along with a whole range of concepts of ideology or false consciousness, which tend to accompany it. So first is the dialectical approach. The second is the model of Freud, Sigmund Freud. The Freudian model of latent and manifest. Latent is hidden, manifest is obvious. So conscious and subconscious, these are the 2 aspects of a man's reality. This is what Sigmund Freud said. So you have in second depth model, you have psychological model. You can analyze any work from the psychological point of view also, or of repression. Repression, you know, when things or feelings and emotions, certain feelings and emotions are repressed, they become detrimental to the overall health of that particular person. Repression is injurious to the health, mental health. Or of repression, which is, of course, the target of Michel Foucault's programmatic and symptomatic pamphlet. The title is there, that is written in French. The existential model, the third model or the third approach, you can say, this is the third way to interpret a text. That is existential model of authenticity and inauthenticity. I explained actually what is the gist of this philosophy yesterday. So you can interpret any work of literature from this perspective also, from the point of view of this philosophy also, whose heroic or tragic thematics are closely related to that other great opposition between alienation and disalienation. So as we move further in any kind of analysis, there are its own, we can say, nuances. Itself equally a casualty of post-structural or postmodern period. And finally, what is the fourth model of depth or fourth model of analysis? That is the latest to come, the great semiotic opposition between signifier and signified. Whose theory it is? Can anybody tell me? Opposition between signifier and signified. Who came up with it?
Sigmund Freud.
No, ma'am. It
No.
was Jack Derrida who opposes the theory of signified and signified.
He opposed the theory. But who came up with it? Saussure, no?
Yes, ma'am.
If you
Saussure.
remember Saussure's theory, he was a linguist and he gave us the concept of lang and parole, or signified and signifier. So this is the latest semiotic, this is semiotics, you can say, opposition between signifier and signified, which was itself rapidly unraveled and deconstructed during its brief heyday in 1960s and 1970s. So we have in this way 4 models or 4 theories of interpreting our works of literature. I think this much is sufficient for you to get the idea of what the postmodernist theory. What replaces these various depth models is, for the most part, a conception of practices, discourses, and textual play. What comes into existence further after that? Practices, discourses, discussions, and textual play, textual analysis, whose new syntagmatic structures we will examine later on, but suffice it at present to observe that here too depth is replaced by surface. This is important, very, very important to note down and keep in mind also how Jameson interprets it, that depth is no more there. It has been replaced by surface. Because now we can say multiple surfaces. In place of depth, we need not go into the deeper meanings. We have to look into different contexts. So contextuality has become important. From textuality of a text, we have to move forward to contextuality. And when we are focusing on contextuality, new idea comes into existence that will be discussed under the next following heading. So what is often called intertextuality is in that sense no longer a matter of depth. But intertextuality, we can't say that takes us to deeper meaning. There is no depth in intertextuality. So from this, we can have the next point, that is the growing popularity of pastiche in place of parody. In the next paragraph, we shall not discuss or read the next paragraph, but I can tell you the gist of it, that in the next paragraph, Jameson tells about, in fact, he says that it is not metaphorical. This depthlessness is not metaphorical. It is very much physical. It can be exemplified. And what example does he give to us? He gives us the example of a building's name. You can read it later on for your further reference. He gives the name of that particular building. When this particular building, this is a high-rise building, a skyscraper, when it is looked at from a certain elevated point, then it just looks like two-dimensional structure having the great sheet of windows only. That I told yesterday also. This is a feature of postmodernist structure or architecture. There is no aesthetic beauty. There is no need to appreciate the beauty of that architectural monument-like kind of thing. But we have simply to look at it from the commercial point of view or its utility point of view. So the example is there. You can read it later on. In the next heading, we have euphoria and self-annihilation. Euphoria, is the feeling, heightened feeling, or you can say the state of excitement, pleasure, the extreme point in that. So this is the resultant feature of lack of depth or depthlessness, and then its replacement by multiple surfaces. What we come across or how it is tried to be compensated for. This is sought to be compensated for by euphoria with the help of intensities that we have discussed in PPT also, that intensities means intense emotions and feelings are there that might be short-lived, that might be temporary. So within that particular time period, that short time, the focus is on the most, the best possible utilization, or you can say realization of all kinds of pleasures. So this is euphoria. We have to focus on the second part of this heading, second paragraph of this heading, that is important, all of which suggests some more general historical hypothesis, namely that concepts such as anxiety and alienation that were characteristic features of the age of anxiety, that means high modernist period, and the experiences to which they correspond, as in the screen, references to screen. See, in that picture, in that painting, let us go back to that painting again. Just a few words about that. How the man is trying to shout, but at the same time, he's trying to shut his ears. Why? He doesn't himself want to listen or hear the resounding or echoes of his own shout. So there are the echoes of that shout or scream that are presented on this painting in the form of concentric circles. They move they remain in the air. You can interpret it like this, that this agony, the anxiety, that they remain in the air. Very environment, you can feel it, you can catch it, and you can express it. This is the agony of this man. The scream are no longer appropriate in the world of the postmodern. The great Warhol figures, again back to great figures or paintings of Andy Warhol, Marilyn Monroe, and Eddie Sedgwick. This is the name of another superstar whose paintings Andy Warhol made and immortalized her. I will also tell you one more thing about Andy Warhol, that he began as a commercial painter or illustrator for a shoe factory, but later on he became a director of the films also. And he promoted Andy Sedgwick. So the relationship of the two, Andy Warhol and Eddie Sedgwick, that was the hot topic of those days, 1970s, around 1960s. The notorious out and self-destructive cases of the ending of 1960s and the great dominant experiences of drugs and schizophrenia. These would seem to have little enough in common anymore. So just we have two images, Munch's painting The Scream and Andy Warhol's paintings of Marilyn Monroe and Eddie Sedgwick. There is no similarity between the two. What is the main feature of the postmodernist paintings of Andy Warhol? The impact of that hallucination or drug-induced illusion and schizophrenia, these would seem to have little enough in common anymore, either with the hysteria or neurotics of Riot's own day. But these two terms, just have a look at drugs and schizophrenia. These two terms have nothing to do with Freud's theory. Freud's theory and Freud's own terms that he came up with, or with those canonical expressions of radical isolation and solitude, anomie and private revolt. So these are two different aspects altogether. One goes type madness, which dominated the period of high modernism. This shift in the dynamics of cultural pathology, very important term. You can note it down. This is the dynamics of cultural pathology. Pathology, you know, where we give our samples for the sake of diagnosis of certain diseases. But here it is cultural pathology, can be characterized as one in which the alienation of the subject is displayed by fragmentation of the subject. So this is the crux, this is the gist of what I wanted to stress or focus upon. This, in place of alienation, in place of anxiety, what are these two main things? Fragmentation, and then the other thing is drug-induced hallucination and morbid feelings. Now, how these different aspects are presented in literature, we don't have much time. Can anybody tell me how much time do I have at present?
I think we have 1 minute left.
Only 1 minute left.
Hmm.
Because I wanted to focus on that poem also, China by Bob Perelman. Just read this poem on your own, but I would brief to you the gist of it as an essence of postmodernist canon. What is postmodern canon? That I have already explained to you. Fragmentation in place of alienation, and schizophrenia in place of anxiety. So these are the new features that have come up according to Frederick Jameson, and how this fragmentation is portrayed or presented in literature. Now it is, the time is to discuss a poem also as our work of literature. Theory, but his psychoanalysis is different from Sigmund Freud's theory, because Sigmund Freud analyzed a man's mind in terms of conscious and subconscious and unconscious. But Jake Lacan, he came up with a new interpretation. He said that a man's unconscious mind is expressed in the form of words. Just see, just have a look at this poem. It is in, you can say, page number. I will tell you the page number. Is written in form of disjointed structures, disjointed words. At one moment, the poet is saying something, the next moment, some different idea comes into his mind, and he starts stating that particular point. Just 4 lines I will pick up, and then the class will come to an end. He says China, about China. These are the viewpoints of Chinese people. We live on the third world from the sun. If it rains, you either have your umbrella or you don't. The wind blows your hat off, the sun rises also. I would rather the stars didn't describe us to each other. I would rather we would do it for ourselves. Run in front of your shadow. A sister who points to the sky at least once a decade is a good sister. The landscape is motorized. The train takes you where it goes. Bridges among water. Can you make sense out of at least these 10 or more than 10 lines that I have read for you? Can you make any sense of it? I should tell you one thing, that when he was writing, just read this section on China. This is very important for you to grasp actually what is the essence of postmodernism.
Dictatorship.
Dictatorship, okay. Whose dictatorship?
China's
superpower?
dictatorship over all the world.
At the time when this poem was written, China was not a dictator.
Okay.
Just focus on it. We live on the third world from the sun, number 3. This is the emergence of the third world. The third world is emerging fast in the form of China. China is a fast developing nation. I should tell you in brief about how Bob Perelman wrote this poem and what was the main idea of it. Bob Perelman, actually, he visited Chinatown, where he came across a number of pictures related to China in the form of, symbols, or we can say images, ideogrammatic images. You have ideogrammatic images, like in that you need not any text to explain it. For example, when there is a car and there is a cross mark, we generally take it as no parking. So this is ideogrammatic images. So he looked at a number of pictures of China in the form of ideogrammatic images with captions also. There were captions under those images. Then those ideas started floating into his mind, and they came again in the form of this poem. The main point is that it is about the development of China, just like a third world country next to two superpowers, that is America and Russia. And how the Chinese people are not being helped by anybody else. They are makers of their own destiny. They are themselves solely responsible for what they have made for themselves or how they have developed themselves. So you can say that, at one moment, he says, we live on the third world from the sun. Number 3, nobody tells us what to do. So we are self-made, we can say, or self-dependent. The people who taught us to count were being very kind. At least there were many who pointed out the greatness of China. In some respects, they were kind. It's always time to leave. How can you say? The very next moment he talks of leaving. Then he says, if it rains, you either have your umbrella or you don't have your umbrella. How will you explain it? The very next moment he says, you need naturally when there is rain, you need umbrella. You might have it. That means when there is some kind of crisis, some adversity is there, you need support system that you or you may not have. But all the same, Chinese people keep on moving forward. This is the essence. You know, this poem has been quoted by Frederick Jameson as an example of language poetry, because Bob Perelman was a member of this language poetry group. That language poetry developed or came forward in reaction against the conventional. They wanted to focus on the importance of words. They wanted to focus on the importance of language. According to these poets, each and every word is meaningful. It tries to convey certain meaning, and the author becomes dead again. The focus is on the insignificance, disappearance, we can say, of the author and emergence of the reader. So it is in the hands of the reader that the text becomes meaningful, and each text can convey meaning, each word can convey its own meaning. I think the time is over for today's class. Is it so? I don't have an idea of this. Can anybody tell me? What is the time?
Yes, ma'am, it's over.
What's the time actually?
It's
2:30.
Okay, then that's all. And I have tried to summarize and sum up, in fact, the main concepts of postmodernism. The whole essay cannot be taken up in detail, but the gist of this essay I have tried to bring before you. So if you have any question, any doubt, but you can come up. We have 1 or 2 minutes more. You can come, you can ask any question. So, okay, I think that's all. Should we disperse? Okay, that's all for today.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.